Sophie Cunningham, Caitlin Clark, Stephanie White. Cunningham spills the beans. WNBA Women's CBA agreement. Is there an agreement that can be reached? Caitlin Clark returning to LPGA. What's the real story? What's going on? We'll cover that and more today on the Money Mike Syndicated Radio podcast. Folks, good to see you. Been away for a little bit, took a little break, got to get the blood pumping again. But coming back to you just to say, you look at this, the WNBA and the CBA agreement and what's going on, and you got a Saudi league out there now, and what Money Mike had said a little while ago, there's going to be a bidding war for Caitlin Clark. There's no doubt about it. There's going to be a bidding war. And the owners that are coming in, whoever has the most money, then can get into it and pay for it, right? So they threw a number out there, $50 million. A lot of people say, no, that's ridiculous. No. For Money Mike, when you're doing Titan business, man, I'll tell you, if you give me LeBron James, right, or you give me Tiger Woods, or you give me Michael Jordan, what's the price tag on one of those athletes? About $50 million a year, right? So really, Caitlin's no different. But here's what I find that's really interesting, and I want to jump back in on the CBA because there's so many different agendas going on. I mean, you got Sue Bird, right, who's an owner, who's going to lead the Olympic team. She's got an agenda going on. Man, you got Candace Parker. Man, Candace Parker has so many agendas going on. Okay, we got the Saudi League. I'm a part of that. I'm in the bid with Tennessee to get over there and get an organization there. I'm chopping down Kathy Engelbert on the leadership. So it's almost like Candace Parker wants to be the commissioner, right? If you really ask Candace and sit down with Candace Parker and said, Candace, let's talk about you being the commissioner, Candace would have a lot to say, right? But that's easy to do once the work's been done, right? The signing of USA Network, 11-year deal. And with the CBA, folks, here's what I see is going to be the hang-up or what's really going on with the CBA and why is it not coming together. A couple areas. The pay, that's easy. That's not challenging. That's chump change for the owners. But then you got to get to retirement, right? You start looking at that retirement bucket and saying, okay, what are we going to match? What are we going to contribute to the players' retirement? That's going to get a little tricky. And then you're going to get into the disability, the benefits, because players who play in this league, they're going to go through the growing, right? They're going to go through this growing of age. And when they get older, your knees start hurting, you can't walk. So the retirement benefits are going to be extremely crucial. Now, throughout all of this that has went on, okay, with the CBA and everything that's going on, then you got the Aces winning the championship. But the Aces won the championship, but they didn't win it as the people's champion. The people's champion, right? And when you're the people's champion, it feels like everybody can celebrate with you. Now, with the Asia Wilson, I'll tell you, I clipped up some things, folks, and I'm going to clip up more, right, just to show you certain highlights. But then somebody clipped up something that on the Asia Wilson special whistle. Good Lord. My Lord, did you guys see that? I mean, that right there, and you go back into it, somebody's betting on this game, right? And Money Mike's all about, being a sharp, right? When you get into it, you got to be a sharp. You got to know what's going on. It's like Floyd Mayweather. I mean, he's watching the Aces warm up before he makes his bet, right? But they're betting on these games, and this thing here is coming to the integrity of this game, and I want to bring with the CBA is Collier, right? Attacked Kathy Engelbert. But what Collier's not telling everyone, Unrivaled made $27 million profit last year, right? Unrivaled made a $27 million profit. Now, if Unrivaled made a $27 million profit, but you're operating a league without a collective bargaining agreement, which means that money just goes down in the pocket. You gave some players some money, but you also made a profit, right? And Unrivaled is not hitting the deck saying, okay, we got Unrivaled profit sharing, right? Unrivaled should be sharing that profit. So really, all the players that played in Unrivaled should have been making like $500,000 a year, right? But that's not going to happen. And for Money Mike, as I look at the CBA and I look at Sue Bird, I'm going to give you the players. Candace Parker, right? You got Kathy Engelbert. you have individuals, Becky Hammond, you have Cheryl Reeve. These people have a different agenda than the agenda that the American people are expecting to see. This thing here, I will tell you, as I look back on it, and all of the events that have taken place and the circumventing of individuals of coming into the WNBA because they didn't meet a criteria or didn't fit the sorority or didn't go along with the program. They were banned out of the WNBA. They were cut. They were cut, right? And so now you're reaching this CBA agreement, and this one here is teetering because now you're saying, hey, we got a product, we got viewership, right? But then again, you utilize something in the middle of a negotiation. We're going to change the Nielsen rating, and we're going to come up with a number that the WNBA is reaching a record number for this, right? So I want to go over the record number. I want to go over the relationship because the number is not meeting the relationship of what the WNBA should be moving in ticket revenue. And I'm going to go over that in just a sec. All right, so let's look at this. The WNBA is saying we have the product. We're here. We have the CBA. The WNBA is coming down to retirement benefits, and also the WNBA Players Association wants to be involved in the negotiation of media rights. Now, that's going to be a little tricky because the WNBA, the Players Union, everybody thinks they're still an owner, right? We're owners over here. We own this league, but they really don't. And it's a dilutable share. As I told you, they started at 42%, but every time you add an expansion team, that 42% keeps reducing itself. And so now you went from being a majority to a minority, okay, in the process. Now, as you move forward, it's one of the things, it's almost like a force fit of we're going to make you pay. And that's what Candace Parker said. That's kind of what Sue Bird is loving the vets. It's kind of how all this has come about. And then on top of it, the players are sitting in a situation of not being in unity in the CBA, which means can the WNBA get all 50, 100 players in one location at one time to bill into this? And they may or may not be able to do that. And the reason why, I don't think everybody agrees with the agenda that they have. Now, the WNBA, as we all know, I mean, it's the LGBTQ community, right? And the question really of all of this, could the community itself, the inclusive community, sell out every arena in the WNBA? Because the forefront of what's being taken place or what product the WNBA is putting on the screen, on America's screen, is different from what the NBA puts on the American screen. And this is the reason why. And I want to go over this because the WNBA has a different picture or a different idea of what they believe. This is how the community wants to accept who they are, right? But you got the Golden State Warriors, and they have inclusive coaches, right? They have coaches that are part of that community, but it's not the main focus on the screen. The main focus on the screen is the players. And nobody's asking the player which community you're part of. We just want to see great basketball. Well, in the WNBA, they have a different belief, and it's really, it's Women's National Sex Basketball Association. There's too much for the American eye to see. There's too much for children to watch at this stage, at this age of being able to watch the WNBA. And I think overall the change may cause that. But you've got to put it in perspective and say, well, what's really the change? And that's going to lead me to Sophie Cunningham and Stephanie White, and how Sophie Cunningham came flat out and said, yes, there's a lot of friction. Stephanie White does not want to work with Caitlin Clark. But then Stephanie White comes out and says how much she loves and wants to work with Caitlin Clark. So really it's two in oil and water. Caitlin Clark knows how to run a basketball team. Caitlin Clark knows how to win basketball games. The Indiana Fever did something nobody really expected them to do. They brought a bunch of athletes together, and they put them on a court, and they said, okay, go play basketball. And they ended up making it at one game from the finals. They just couldn't make it all the way, but they got one game away. However, when you look at those things today collectively, was that a great job, or did the Indiana Fever management do a great job? Because along the way of the Indiana Fever management this year, looking back, there was a lot of mishaps and moves and mistakes that were made. I can look back today and say, when you brought in Stephanie White, that really brought in a bombshell, right? Because nobody knew Stephanie White had that much baggage, right? Nobody knew that. That was all hidden all throughout the summer of Stephanie White and coming in. So you got the fans who love the Indiana Fever up in their arms because they don't understand with Stephanie White and why would she do the Indiana Fever the way she did. Knowingly, right? And this is where the WNBA is going to cross barriers, and I've seen it twice, right? Because now you're going to get into employment law and relationships, okay? You're going to get into employment law and relationships. And where does the relationship start and where does the relationship end? Because America is not interested in your relationship. They're interested in turning on the TV. They're interested in seeing the teams play basketball. They're interested in apple pie, popcorn, cold beer, or a cold soda pop, right? That's what America wants to see. So now you've got a situation where Stephanie White came into the Indiana Fever and almost wrecked the Indiana Fever, right? Now, the questions go up the ladder. Were the Indiana Fever supportive of this? Because there's no way in the world I would have brought Bonner, right? I would have brought Bonner to the Indiana Fever, knowing that Bonner is in a love relationship and marriage with Alyssa Thomas. See, Stephanie White spearheaded that, brought that to us. Now, the management of the Indiana Fever, right? And you look at what Sophie Cunningham is saying, because Sophie Cunningham saying there's like 4 or 5 other agendas going here. Caitlin Clark is not really getting what Caitlin Clark deserves to get, and Caitlin Clark is fighting a battle internally on the Indiana Fever. Right? And this is the trueness of it, because now you got Bonner you sent over there, right? This is a love triangle, and this is where I'm saying the triangle love, the triangle relationship. Pretty soon that's going to have to be code of conduct in the contract, right? Because the Indiana Fever have been snake bitten twice. They've been snake bitten twice by the same thing. And I'm going to go over that. Give me a sec here. Nothing like a good cup of Joe in the morning. So let's talk about it. The snake bitten, because you got Stephanie White is in this, and then you got to ask, is Stephanie White part of the W? Money Mike, and I'm not really knocking anything about the W. I'm just saying the W, the way they played basketball, is not going to sell or make money. You can see now as it goes through this and how it all comes together, it's not going to make money. And then when you have teams winning championships that can't sell out arenas or they got issues, boy, that's a lot, right? Because everybody thinks you can pull it off in 1 year and do a miracle. Well, here's the funny part about it, right? So after you got done with Bonner, and Bonner had to go, and that really wrecked the team, right? That jacked the team up from being where it was. And then you came back, and the year before that, you got Alyssa Smith and you got Dejanay Carrington, right? And so here's the funny part about it. I mean, when you want to go through a channel of destruction, I'll tell you what it is. It's Curt Miller. Curt Miller's a challenge of destruction to me. I mean, I don't know Curt Miller. I know that you look at the players that played on the Fever, McDonald and all of them. Curt Miller cut them. Odyssey Sims, Curt Miller cut them, right? Not good enough, don't fit my complexion, right? So it went there further that Curt Miller's got himself in a pickle again, right? Because he brings Dejanay Carrington in, right? And he brings in Alyssa Smith. Now, here's 2 players. I'm going back to Bonner and Smith, because why do I want to go back to Bonner and Smith? Indiana Fever had both of these players, and they also had Timmy. And this is the reason why the Indiana Fever did not win a WNBA championship. They couldn't replace the post players they got rid of for whatever reason, but they allowed Nalissa Smith to go, which I knew that'd come back and snake bite you, because now you lose the game 5. She doesn't get a lot of points, plays defense, gets rebounds. Now she's wearing a ring, right? And it was the same thing with Bonner. Well, it really didn't work out, but you brought this to your table. So it made me really realize, okay, well, with the WNBA, okay, what agenda are they really pushing? Because now the agenda is swinging to where I see the WNBA, and when I turn on the TV, the WNBA is more about relationships. It's more about who's dating who, okay? It's more about black women fighting on the screen, right? This is what America sees, and I'm trying to figure out, of course, with the activism and the community that they have, can the LGBTQ community sell out every arena in the WNBA? Because that alleviates the problem. Because after a while, you're going to have a problem with the WNBA a Christian league, the WNBA believe in God, and the WNBA believe in whatever it wants to believe in, right? Because at the end of the day, folks, and I'm going to say this because now you got men entering into the picture of coaching in the WNBA. And why do the men are coaching? Because the men, the owners want to play a certain way. And the WNBA coaches don't know how to teach that. They don't know how to play that way of basketball. And it goes back to just like what was said, right? The NBA has been in existence going on 140 years. The WNBA has been in existence over 30 years. So who's going to know more basketball, okay, as it comes down? Because it's not really bringing it home, but it's bringing it to the standpoint, the reason they're hiring men so they can implement. The men are not looking to stay in the WNBA for the next 15 years. This is a stepping stone for them where they can teach some players the game. Back to Sophie Cunningham and Caitlin Clark. There's a bigger rift there, folks, than most people will believe. There's more going on in that, and the love triangles and everything, and that's always the WNBA in the front of it. And it really it's tiresome to the American public, because after being in the basketball business for many, many years, and I'm talking 15 years of running AAU basketball tournaments, doing somewhere 25, 50, 100 tournaments a year, right? And you're looking at that, and you look at the number of men, right? Because the WNBA does not have a daddy-daughter day. The WNBA should have a daddy-daughter day. And at the end of the day, I mean, just telling it right, and I'm from the community itself, right? And I have a couple families out of 7 children, that 2 were in the community. I accept that, I move on. But here's the problem, right, is you have no protection, right? And you got to have spiritual protection, and a lot of that really does fall on a man, right? And so I'm looking at all this, and you have every right of ability to raise a child, but you can never teach that child how to be a man, right? And what does that mean? I mean, I was raised by men, right? Men go outside, men hammer things. If you hit your finger on a nail, there's no ice coming. You're going to suck that thumb. You're going to go back out there, right? So men have a different way of presenting the game of basketball. And so it's an internal battle, because you have alpha women, I repeat, alpha women who want to be alpha males. That's a tough one to survive in the WNBA. Now, with the CBA, will it ever come together? There's so many agendas. There's so many underhands. There's so many kickbacks. I mean, there's so much stuff going on here. I mean, how do you even negotiate an agreement? And it comes down to retirement benefits, folks. It's going to come down to that. I don't think pay is an issue. I really don't. I think the WNBA owners are willing to pay, but they're not willing to pay for the character that the WNBA presents on the TV. Folks, character and client image are what sells tickets. The WNBA viewership is extremely high, but that number concerns me, and I've went over business with you backwards and forwards. It's not about that. I'm going to just get to the point so that you guys can understand. The WNBA viewership doesn't match the price of the tickets. Okay, that means you got a skewed number going on there. I repeat, the WNBA viewership does not correlate with the price of the WNBA ticket. The WNBA, if you've got record viewership, then you should have a ticket price that shows that. When Caitlin Clark had the record viewership. I'm only talking about Caitlin here, right? When all the viewers were tuned in, the ticket price reflected the viewership, meaning that the ticket price is supposed to go up higher because you're sold out. Now, the NFL had a problem like the WNBA where they can't sell out games. The NFL went to a blackout system. Well, we're just going to black the game out locally until you guys start buying these tickets. See, the WNBA is not doing that, and that one there is really going to be a downfall because now if the people won't pay $6 to go see you play a basketball game, and don't get me wrong, folks, in all those 15 years of doing tournament, I mean, it's a minimum for me coming to the door. It's $10. I mean, if you move a franchise to Sacramento, the minimum ticket price we're going to have is $25, right? I mean, you get to the top at $25. We're not going any lower than that because we're already conditioned to pay for it, right? But when you're sitting there and you got to drop the ticket price and you come back and you say, I have record viewership, you know that's a skewed number because now I can't take that number and correlate that number to how many fans are buying the souvenirs and the merchandise, right? Because you should be able to, Vegas, the number that I want to see is the Las Vegas Aces increase in merchandise. If you show me that number, now you're showing me a number that I can make a correlation because it doesn't matter how many people you say viewing it. And at the end of the day, if you want to take every sports bar in Las Vegas that's playing an NFL game and all the people that are going through the casinos on Sunday, well, the NFL has 1 billion people watching the game. I mean, they have 1 billion, right? And that's what the new data big base is saying, that we're going to take everybody that's watching on their phone, they're watching in the sports book, and watching everywhere. But that number's got to convert. The NFL sells a lot of merchandise. Ohio State Buckeyes sell a lot of merchandise, right? Michigan sells a lot of merchandise. You have to really know the business to make that work because now you're getting back into what they would call acquisition costs because now you got to pay the season ticket holders to come because you're going to have to drop the ticket price or give them more games for less so that they will come. And that's going to be challenging. So when you look at this, you look at the whole thing, you've got the WNBA and what they believe in the community. You've got Sophie Cunningham coming here saying there's trouble in paradise, right? There's trouble up there. And everybody can kind of sniff it out, right? But it's like Stephanie White bringing in the triangle. I mean, you look at the management, did they support this? The management releasing Alyssa Smith, she goes on and gets a ring. So they made mistakes, right? So where do you grade the Indiana Fever management, right? Because if they didn't have the turnaround at the end of the year, you probably give them an F, right? Because it was going downhill till you injected these other players to come in and play for you. They weren't playing good basketball. And from Stephanie White talking about coaching, you're not coaching these guys, right? These guys are coming in for a little, 10-game set, and they're playing just what they know how to do, right? And so you look at that and you say, wow, this is going to be coach of the year. And okay, well, maybe Stephanie White's going to take on another job, or I'll come back and tell you, the Indiana Fever, at the end of the day, and I close up on this, folks, Indiana Fever need to put a 5-year contract in front of Stephanie White. You need to put a 5-year deal, sign this, right? You need to put a 5-year deal. If she can't sign that 5-year deal, then you got to look at this and you got to really know, okay, that there's something else going on here and we got to make changes. Folks, I'll tell you, I'm back. Have no fear. The Money Mike is here. I'm going to get into some deep water stuff. It's off season. I'm going to speak my mind. Indiana Fever got to get some post players. We'll come back again next time up. We're going to talk about Aaliyah Boston, how great her game has gotten. And now we got to talk about Lexi Hole and what the contract and not making the All-Star game. So there's a lot of stuff going around. All right. But at the end of the day, the Indiana Fever are going to be in a bidding war for players. And I'm talking about their players, not the other team's players. They're going to be in a bidding war for their own players. We'll cover that. Welcome back, NBA. The Indiana Fever season never ends. So stick around. We'll keep it pumping. This is the Money Mike Syndicated Radio Podcast. All things are possible to those who believe, and this will be the greatest offseason that the WNBA has ever had. We'll see you soon.